Please give a round of applause for Rui!
Getting goosebumps. Great energy, guys. Welcome to the session. I'm delighted today to be sitting with three exceptional CFOs who are from a younger generation. And what I'm going to ask the panelists to do is, if we can start with you, Nakedi, is just maybe give a quick introduction of who you are, kind of where you've come from, and maybe something the audience would not know about you, just to kind of spice things up a bit.
I'm Nakedi Ramaphakela. I'm a girl from the township in Mamelodi, so I've really come from nothing. And in terms of my career, I started my career at PwC. Having done well in school, you know, they sponsored me because obviously my parents would have never afforded to take me to school. So I was fortunate enough to have gotten a bursary from PwC. I worked for PwC for a while up until I was a manager. I then joined a company called Rui Morais Holdings for 7 years, which I worked my way up within the company. And I think at the age of 28, I got appointed as FD. At Rui Morais, and it was just a journey of just working hard, but also just proving myself.
Brilliant. And what doesn't the crowd know about you?
What the crowd doesn't know about me is that I'm a very good swimmer.
Fantastic. Gideon Joubert.
Hi, my name is Gideon Joubert. I'm the CFO for FirstRand's Rest of Africa portfolio. I'm a farm boy from the Eastern Cape. Also was at PwC, so clearly PwC is a great career, is great from a career perspective. Post being a manager at PwC, I joined RMB, Rand Merchant Bank. From 2014 onwards was the CFO for the investment banking division, and for about 2 years now, the CFO for Rest of Africa for the group. What do you not know about me? I'm a massive nerd, but that's probably easy to see. You can guess that. I've worked on 4 different continents.
Brilliant. Rui.
How's it, guys? My name is Rui Morais. I am the CFO of Dischem Pharmacies. So I actually went to EY. The guys that work for me are from PwC, but... No. I'm kidding. Those are 2 reputable names that I suppose it's good that we come from those 2 brands. I was at EY. I subsequently, I've always enjoyed retail, so I suppose slightly odd for a male, but I really enjoy understanding consumer psychology. So, you know, I think I was 25 at the time and I was on the Dischem account. I got the opportunity to go over there. We were 17 stores at the time. I then became CFO when I was 27, and I've been CFO for 8 years now, so that makes me 35. We listed the group 3 years ago, so that was it's been an incredible journey. We now 170 stores, but I think the thing that I enjoy the most is that I'm working in an environment that I really, really enjoy. I really enjoy the consumer psychology of everyone who retails and engages with retail space. Things that you might not know about me. I'm a massive Lego fan. And I think now, you know, it's incredible what they do, and it's incredible as a brand. But I think the thing that makes it so special to me is, and maybe someone can stand if they've done this, but I've built tons of Lego. I've built more Lego than I've punched in things on a calculator. And the incredible thing is I've never had any other Lego piece not fit into another. And I mean, that is testament to like perfection as a brand. And when you're in a consumer space and you strive to be that, it's so nice to see and engage with brands who have achieved that. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. So just a little, you know, context. We live in an age of digital transformation, 4th industrial revolution. You know, winning and losing is happening faster than ever before. The way we work, manage, and lead as CFOs is also constantly changing. Diversity has been, you know, labeled as the critical success to surviving the 4th industrial revolution, and part of that equation would be generational diversity. Nakedi, I'm going to come back to you. as a young CFO, the generational diversity, perspective that you bring into the equation, how does that benefit you? How do you think that benefits you, and what do you think you bring to the table that maybe older CFOs would not bring to the table?
So, from our...
Sorry, Nakedi. Sorry,
Go for it.
Nakedi. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, no, fantastic. I think, for me in my personal journey, because obviously for me, I feel like there's like 3 layers of bias. I'm young, I'm black, I'm female, So it is quite a challenge, first of all, to walk into a boardroom because you don't have the relevant experience, right? But as young CFOs, I don't think we try to bring the experience, but for me, it's always been bringing a different perspective, right? Because we think differently, we see things differently, we're exposed to things differently. So in a boardroom, I always bring a different perspective that the older generation wouldn't bring, right? And speaking about fourth industrial revolution, I mean, technology comes to us so easily, it's part of our DNA, and that's always something that you can bring to the party, in terms of automation, in terms of, doing things slightly differently. I mean, we grew up in a different generation, so you must just find your niche and find, you find that different thing that you can bring, and that's how people respect you, because you can't say, oh, when I was growing up in 1955, So definitely, it depends on your background and your experience, but I've found that, especially in terms of technology and automation, coming from finance, I always brought that value onto the board to say, this is what we can do differently, we can cut this process from, 12 finance people to 2 people, doing management accounts within 3 days instead of 15 days.
Gideon, and from your side, what do you bring differently to the table compared to your FirstRand colleagues?
So I think Nakedi summarized it very well. You're more in touch with technology. You bring a very different perspective. You also bring a hunger, an energy that your senior colleagues sometimes lack. You must, though, know you've not seen the full economic cycle, especially in things like banking. And you need to know good times turn and bad times becomes good again. So you've got a different perspective, you've more energy, more passion, and I think you've got a broader worldview and a broader view on the possibilities that is available out there.
Brilliant. Roy, I mean, you as you said, you've listed a company, you're a CFO at 27. You've seen it all. What perspective do you think you brought differently to the table? Maybe an elder CFO who might have been in that role, not that there was someone.
So, I mean, from my perspective, and it's not that I disagree about experience, but I think experience can be defined differently. So inherently, and I mean, so I started school when I was very young. I started school not being able to speak English. I'm Portuguese. I was Portuguese speaking at the time, and so I've always battled with this concept of experience, and it was only in my working world that I realized, experience, as much as it's perceived as someone doing something for X amount of years, it's really about your understanding of the industry that you're working in. And that's one example. It could be the sport that you're playing. But you always, as a young individual, whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's around a strategic discussion, you get discounted because of that. So, what I try to do is I try to force experience on myself. That could be many different things. It could be the way that you understand the industry, moving away from a traditional CFO role to a problem solver, because that is very much what's needed. And going through the profession, it teaches you to solve problems. So the value I've always seen in the profession, and I have a different view on the profession, is the profession needs to teach certain theories, but we all acknowledge that those are now available digitally, kind of at our beck and call. And to be perfectly honest, I think all of us, when it comes to the really difficult theoretical stuff, we use service providers. So what role do you have as CFO? Your role is to solve a problem. One of the things that you have to know to be able to do that is you have to have an in-depth understanding of the industry in which you work. We might not have seen cycles, we've definitely not worked for many years, but all of that information is on hand, and logically you can digest all of that information. So the first gap I've had to cover is the experience piece. The second thing, and I think both the guys have said it, is that technology is inherent to disruptability, and we have lived through technology. So it does give you an ability to think differently from a disruption perspective. I mean, in my industry, I think it's backwards that I don't know if anyone's on a chronic medication, you have to see your doctor after every 6 or 12 months to get another prescription. You have to book an appointment, you have to go and see the doctor. It does not make sense. But it's a process that has been, by virtue of regulation, by virtue of how people interact, it's a process been around a long time and it hasn't been challenged. So I think there's the disruptible piece, and then there's this piece of testing what experience is, and how you define that for yourself. I think those two things are very important.
Excellent. So just to the audience, I want to give you a chance to engage with the panel as well. This is not about them talking to you, but also an interaction. So start thinking of your questions, because towards the end, I'm going to give you a bit of time. Rui, I want to stick with you for another quick second. So you've had a fast trajectory. Who supported you on that way? Who supported you on that journey? Was it a conscious to go out and find someone, or did people just come to you naturally?
Look, the truth is that sometimes the stars need to align. I mean, an opportunity presented itself to me, and initially, certainly during my initial years of being CFO, I was very gracious for the fact that I landed in the space of opportunity. But I think as you progress in your career, you realize that one of the things that you need to do well is take advantage of opportunities. I don't necessarily think that people, I mean, over a life cycle, people will have maybe 1 or 2 more opportunities than others, but it's the amount of opportunities that people pass by, and the different kind of direction that takes you relative to another one. So, I mean, for me, you have to be a believer in yourself. It doesn't matter how much support you have. I mean, you have to accept that there are things that are going to be shoved in your face, that you're too young, that you cannot do it. And it's okay. It's natural. It's instinctive from other people who don't expect someone to play that role, but you need to be a believer in yourself, because if you start doubting yourself, it actually doesn't matter what support structures you have around you. In terms of support structures, for me, two of the most important things. One, the people that you work have to have a belief in you, that you work for. So, you can be a young CFO that is effectively a placeholder. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility to protect the balance sheet. We have a responsibility to be strategic in nature. And you've got to not only be in the boardroom, but you've got to carry the appropriate weight in the boardroom. That, to me, is fundamentally important. So it's one thing being a young CFO. It's another thing being a young CFO that actually lays in from a strategic perspective. So the people you work for have to appreciate and respect that. And the second thing is, like, the journey is a tough one, right? I mean, I don't think anyone here underestimates the amount of work that it takes, and your family need to understand your goal, your ambition, because it can unravel in your personal life when you're so focused on your work life. And the truth is that, in my opinion, they're interdependent. I mean, if you're unhappy in your personal life, it's going to impact how much you can contribute in your work life.
Gideon, who supported you in your journey? And what do the major kind of, like, where they supported you, that wow factor?
So my career has largely been corporate driven. So I was at PwC, then at RMB, now at FirstRand. So I've been blessed in all of those roles in terms of having a strong sponsor. But you don't get a sponsor from walking in. You get a sponsor from working very hard, showing you can do the tough challenges, and being a person that can solve problems. So just the one thing that's always worked for me is there's a lot of problems in any organization. There's some easy places and tough spots. You want to be in the tough spots and solve the problems others can't. Then you build a brand for yourself. Through that process, at both PwC, I had a strong sponsor and a senior partner by doing a number of some of these bigger engagements well. When I joined RMB, I had a strong sponsor in the RMB CFO, again, by running with some of his big projects for him and delivering on those. And then that opens the door. Whatever job you've got today, your next job, when you apply for it, they're going to phone your boss, whether it's internal or external organization. So whatever you're doing today, make sure you do it damn well. And sponsorship is very important. As you get more senior in your career, get yourself a coach also, somebody you can bounce off on. All skills you can learn. And a lot of the softer skills are skills that you need to develop, invest in, and make time for. The family piece you highlighted, yes, it's absolutely critical. You need to have a stable family situation, and you need to have a family situation that supports you and understands you. I travel a lot through the continent, but when I'm here, for example, I put my kids to bed. It's a non-negotiable. You can phone me before that, you can phone me after that. That hour in my day is non-negotiable, but that's also critical. And you need to have people that understand that.
So family structures, that foundation. Nakedi, you mentioned your upbringing, how tough it was. Who supported you? How did that roll out?
In my personal journey, I think obviously the foundation of everything is family. So for me, my parents have always been around, they've always been there, they've never tried to direct me in any way, but they've always just supported me. So I think I'm fortunate in that regard, because not everybody has that benefit. And I think, as I moved up in my career, I've always had leaders that always looked, were always guiding me in some way. But like Gideon was saying, you have to deliver. So it's not enough for you to say, you've got the support, you've got the sponsor. You still have to deliver. And in my case, what happened was, on 2 occasions, the CFOs at the time resigned. And so there was an opportunity for me to act in the role. So I acted on 2 occasions and proved myself to show that I can do the job. And that's how I got the role at a very young age. It's because I showed that I can do the job. But I also kept my the former CFOs, I kept them as mentors. So whenever I had any sort of challenge to deal with, I always could pick up the phone and bounce ideas off of them. So I think it's also very important to start to build a sort of a network. And mentoring, I think, is very important. It's very critical because as a young CFO, there's a lot of blind spots, especially in terms of stakeholder engagement and some of the softer skills, right? They don't come naturally to you because, you haven't lived, through tough times and all of that. So it always helps to have a more senior mentor who's going to guide you and show you, the way, especially when it comes to dealing with difficult stakeholder situations and board engagement. Because board engagement as well, in as much as it's about what you know, it's also about building relationships with the people that are sitting on the board. And it's also about understanding your audience and, how to position something. Because if you need to influence the people, you need to position it in a certain way, and that's where some mentors come in. So I've been fortunate to have really good leaders that I've worked with, but I've also proven myself in that process.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a quote. It goes, "In the end, we regret the chances we didn't take." Rui talked about grabbing an opportunity. You talked about grabbing an opportunity. So in terms of fast-tracking a career per se, sometimes we need to get over that fear aspect, back yourself, believe in yourself, which I think there's a tremendous self-belief here. It's not an arrogance, it's a self-belief. Coupled with mentors or sponsors and kind of people who can guide you on that journey. It's interesting, we had a previous discussion with some elder CFOs, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to them, and we were talking about, do you plan your career? So maybe the question to you, Gideon, is, did you wake up one morning and go, I'm going to be a CFO and I'm going to plot on my chart every day, or did it kind of just fall into play? What advice would you give to the audience around aspiring CFOs? How do you plan this thing, or is it fate?
Okay, so I didn't plan to become a CFO. I nearly became a deal maker twice over. And it's been every point in my career path. That was the other path I was considering. But in terms of advice, so a lot of personal experience, it takes time to master art. It takes time to learn. And when you make choices, if you're in the lucky position where you are, where you know where you want to go, and I assume if you're sitting in this room, you kind of know where you want to go, make choices that take you closer to that goal. And guys, younger guys often come to my office, I've got these 2 choices, I'm going to spend another 3 years doing this, then I'm going to do what I really want. Do what you want today. It takes time to master art. You have to be in a seat where those opportunities we've all spoken about, that at least you've got sight of them. So if you want to be a CFO, where's the next organization, where's the next spot in your organization or in another organization that takes you closer to that role? You want to be a CEO, CFO is a long way to get there. A lot of guys want to become CEO, but if you want to be a CFO, choose today you want to get there, and then spend time learning about finance, investing in finance. What's the latest in terms of the latest developments in finance? So it's maybe a small spot. My own career didn't quite go that way. It was opportunities that came across my own way that steered me towards a CFO seat.
Roy, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very true what Gideon has said. I think everyone in this room is at an advantage, because my own view is that the finance path, or look, I speak from my own experience. I've always, since I can remembered, wanted to run a retailer. I enjoy it. It's what I've wanted to do. And Gideon touched on it, but I think there's different channels in terms of how you focus on getting there. So, your traditional finance challenges allows you to have the conversations with people that can understand what you bring to the table, can appreciate what input you can add a lot sooner than on the operational side. So the point I made about experience earlier is finance at its core is still very much protected because it's theoretical. Right? You need to understand the theory, like a doctor, so you can make inroads into higher levels in an organization faster. So, my own view, and I mean, I'm happy to share it, is, I chose the finance function because I felt that I could add value at a C-suite level early on. I mean, and it's played out like that. I mean, whether I do end up running a retailer or not, we shall see. But in terms of my view on how to get there, it was the finance route, because it allowed the conversations that Gideon had made reference to, allowed you to sit in chairs where opportunities were in front of you. I guess I could have gone to a store itself and tried to go an operational route. I guarantee you at 27 I wouldn't be running the operations of a retailer. It's just my view on, it's how you position where you want to end up going. And there's a lot of thought that goes into that ultimately if you want to be successful. That's just one example, but I suppose I could share many, as the guys next to me could share.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is a solid foundation of skill set that needs to be built over time, built on credibility, trust. But that's a lot of the time the technical experience. But you guys are leaders. Leadership is very different sometimes. I want to ask you, Nakedi, and I'm going to read a kind of quote to you. It's based on a book by James Kerr called Legacy, and it goes like this. I think it's one of the best definitions of leadership, and then I want to unpack what do you think leadership skills need. And it talks around a facilitated style of interpersonal leadership in a learning environment concerned with adaptive problem solving and continuous improvement, and in which humility, not knowing all the answers, delivers strength. I wanted to get your comment on that statement as a leadership quote, if you agree, disagree, and how did you learn your leadership skills?
All right, sure. I think sometimes we take leadership and we turn it into this broad and complex term, but essentially for me,
James, good.
For me, leadership, it starts, for me, I'm the firstborn in my family, and I mean, from there, you develop quite a few leadership skills, and I'm quite a few years older than my siblings. So from there, you start to learn some of the leadership skills from there. But for me, what leadership essentially is about is that you can't separate leadership and who you are, in my view. Leadership is about knowing who you are. Leadership is about humility, and everybody does say leadership is about service. Leadership is really about creating an enabling environment for everybody to thrive within your business, right? So as a CFO, you've got to look at your team, right? And you've got to say, how do I make the path clear for them so that they can deliver, right, on what it is that they're here to deliver. But also what leadership is about setting a vision, you know. You need to be able to sit with your team and say, this, broadly speaking, is where we want to go. And you need to be able to explain to each of your team members their piece of the puzzle, because I always struggle with leaders who just don't give you direction. So for me, I've always pride myself in giving my team the direction, to say this is where we want to see ourselves, and sitting with every team member and saying, this is where you fit the puzzle, so that people are fully engaged, people know what they're there to do on a daily basis, and essentially people enjoy what they're doing. And in terms of humility, I think you must always be humble, because you must respect everybody, you must treat everybody equally. You know, for me, you know, I respect everybody from the cleaner to, you know, the CEO, and for me, I see people as people. And I think also as leaders sometimes, you know, you need to just get into a room and just start to engage with people, you know, speak to the cleaner, ask them who they are, you know, ask them about their kids, and some of the insights that you gain from that, you know, are invaluable. So it does resonate with me very much.
Gideon, do you think the fact that you had a, you know, natural leadership ability, you know, catapulted you up the ranks, and you know, how did you gain those skills from a personal perspective?
So, leadership is inherently about a connection with a person. They must trust you. They must know that you have their back. I think Nakedi's point around setting a vision, something people can buy into, that's more than just coming to work today. It's important also, those moments, I think your example of the cleaner is very special. When you spend time with people, they must know in that moment you are their focus, or they are your focus, and they're in that moment with you. So you ask, leadership is a skill, you need to learn it. It takes time, but you need to practice it every day. There is an interesting Harvard Business Review of one of the most critical aspects in leaders is self-awareness. That awareness, how people are experiencing you, how they perceive you, and what you need to do different today. So this concept of self-awareness in your leadership journey, and you ask me, how did I learn my skills? You're not born with it. You practice it over time through many years. But you need to be aware how people are experiencing you, and therefore you need to be able to adapt your style and adapt with different people what works and what doesn't work. If you don't have a connection with them, and you won't be able to do that.
So Rui, becoming a CFO, it sounds glamorous. Becoming one of the youngest CFOs ever sounds fabulous, but it comes with its scars. It comes with its, you know, it's not so glamorous sometimes. What have been the hurdles, the scars, the beatings that you've taken getting to where you are?
We don't have enough time. It's like 17 minutes left. No, I think, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. It's difficult to pinpoint. But I think the thing that's been the biggest challenge for me is essentially, I suppose you could term as upward management. And when I talk about upward management, it's a little bit of what the guys next to me said. You know, leadership for me inherently is about personality understanding. So you have to understand the people you lead, not just in their professional life, in their personal life. You know, someone who's having a challenge at home is different capability-wise to someone who isn't in the workplace. So that upward and cross management has been the biggest challenge. So I think one of my biggest learnings is, you know, I always believed I was theoretically capable, and I have inherently a self-belief that I can do what I set my mind to do. But I was taught very quickly that I am only as good as the capabilities of the people that are in my team in terms of delivering. And when I talk about a team, I talk about a team that includes people that work for me, people I work with, and people I work for. And if you don't understand the personalities that you're working, if you don't have a personal relationship with the people that you're working, it is going to bite you. I was going to say, can I say arse? Yeah. It's going to bite you in the arse at a later stage. So I think that was my biggest lesson, is and maybe there is an element of of what is valuable in experience, if it's done the right way, is learning the people that work with, for, and who you work for. You work for you and who you work for. You have to understand the individual and developing that relationship. I mean, I've had many scars because I didn't do that. So that's probably been the biggest challenge in my
So
career.
the team component you mentioned raises a point for me around a book that I've read called Extreme Ownership, and it is a bit extreme. It's about how Navy SEALs lead and win. And there's a concept that comes out of that extreme ownership going, there's no such thing as bad teams, only bad leaders. What does that, do you think that sounds true?
I think it's 100% right. I mean, as a leader, you have the ability to choose your team. So, I mean, like,
If that doesn't work,
that's the essence of it. I mean, you're accountable. So, yeah, I think you're a poor leader if you blame your team. That's my view. I mean,
Gideon?
You're a poor leader if you blame your team. You need to have the right people in your team. If any of you are in a management position, the most important decision you make is not the capital investment decisions, not that big business cases, it's the people you're hiring, right? There's a couple of components to that. The majority of people we're going to be hiring, they'll have the technical skills. It's that ability, will they gel with your team? Will they work well with you? Will they be able to deliver consistently? So I buy the concept, but the most important decisions any at least finance leaders makes is his hiring decisions. My own scars has come from where I made poor hiring decisions myself, some of them.
Nakedi, I'm going to come to you now, but I just again want to reiterate to the audience, we're going to start opening up to you so that you can have discussions with the panel. So please get your questions ready, because I think there's a number of juicy questions coming your way. But maybe as a kind of, to start ending off, Nakedi, to the audience, people who want to fast track their kind of career, is there like a magic pill you can take? And what advice could you give to people who want to kind of, they go, if only I was there, they're eager. What advice would you give to anybody in the audience on how to fast track their career potentially?
I think for me, it's and sometimes I'm a bit conflicted with this question, because not everyone is going to be a CFO, and not everyone is meant to be a CFO. So for me, the advice that I always give everyone is really, it starts with you. So it starts within, right? You need to understand who you are, first of all, and you need to understand where it is that you want to go. And sometimes that doesn't lead you to a CFO role. So sometimes we're chasing something that is inherently not what we should be doing. So for me, it's important for you to be very self-aware, to start to dig within, to say, what is it that I want? Secondly, once you're on the journey of figuring that out, right? I think attitude for learning is very important, right? You constantly have to be learning. You constantly have to be looking at what's the next, what's the future, what's happening in the market. You need to be learning. Do I need to be doing a coding course now? Do I need to do a robotics process automation course? So you need to constantly be learning and evolving and moving with the market. I think that's very important. And I think you need to get yourself a mentor or a coach. That can be different people, but I think you definitely do need a mentor. This is somebody that is going to help guide your journey. This is somebody who's going to that you can bounce ideas off of. And wherever you are within the company that you are in, because for me, I wasn't in a big corporate like Gideon was. I was in a smaller sort of entity, so it was very easy for me to be visible. Sometimes it's not that easy to be visible. So in that instance, make sure that you do get a sponsor, but make sure that you get a sponsor that understands you. So for me, I've spent a lot of time, trying to find the right type of person to mentor me, and who's not going to try and steer me in the direction that they went through, but who's going to guide what I want to do. So spend a bit of time in terms of what type of mentor do you want, what type of sponsor do you want, because sometimes you just don't gel with the mentors that you meet.
Okay. Gideon?
I've said it before, do what you do today very, very well. So whatever you're doing today, do it well. Be reliable. So what you commit to, make sure you deliver. That self-awareness I've spoken about is absolutely critical. Know where you're strong, know where you are today, know how you're feeling today. I can't underestimate, like my colleague next to me, English wasn't I also only learned English in high school. So get yourself a mentor, get yourself a coach once you're in a leadership position to practice your soft skills and to develop your soft skills. And then, yes, the one piece of advice is work hard. If you want to have a senior role, it doesn't come easy.
So no magic pill.
There's no magic pill.
Roy?
Except in our stores. If you shop there. No, I'll let you know when we find one. No, I think from my side, and maybe it's something that certainly I've lived by it, but beyond just being a CFO, I think the one thing that I made myself very aware is you have to be your own harshest critic. So the reason I say that is because it's only inherently you that knows what your capabilities are. So if you wake up one morning and you think, I'm letting myself down, you can convince everyone else. They don't know what potential sits inside you. But if you realize your own potential, whether that's being a finance manager, whether that's being a cleaner, whether that's being an Uber driver, whether that's being CEO, whether it's running the country, the world will get better because everyone's realizing their own potential. So as long as you're your own hardest critic and you have true and honest conversations about your own ability with yourself, it's not really a CFO thing. It's not a CEO thing. It's just inherently your own potential. I think that's an important thing.
Brilliant. I just want to touch on a few key words that I'm getting out here just to reiterate before we hand over. Can we get the mic ready, please? So, a sense of self-belief, backing yourself, attitude. You mentioned that, Nakedi. I think that is such an important thing. Attitude, to me, is the ultimate supercharging somebody. You can have all the technical knowledge if you have the wrong attitude. Opportunity, grabbing that opportunity. When something comes up, don't be scared to jump at it. And it reminds me of a quote by, before we hand over, by Marianne Williamson. She often confused with Nelson Mandela's inauguration speech, but she wrote it, and it goes something like this: "It is not our light that frightens us. It's not our darkness that frightens us. It's our light." And we're so scared to just be amazing, and that's the kind of thing that I think needs to be reiterated on your career journey, that don't be scared, jump at it, take that opportunity. So what I'm going to ask now is if we can just really give these phenomenal CFOs, younger CFOs according to the list, a huge round of applause. I think the insights have been amazing.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is, you are a CFO at a young age, and then you are into this big organization. There is an operations executive who actually maybe earned his PhD way before you even earned your CASA. Yes, and then there's also an HR executive, supply chain executive, way senior than you, and you are now in as the young CFO. When the CEO is away, you are the acting CEO. How do you balance giving your input to those senior guys who always tell you that, no, we have been doing it this way before you even earned your first degree?
Sure. So, is that
addressed to anybody?
Is that
or?
myself or just the panel?
Go for it.
I can give it a bash. I think, so yes, some conversations where the guys are making references to times in their lives before I was born, so I can't really relate, but I think it comes down to how you build a relationship with those individuals. So I'm fortunate enough to come from an organization that is maybe not as hierarchically structured as you would expect us to be. So, the people that make decisions are really tightly knit together. And there's I suppose a conventional respect between between all of us. So I mean, I think everyone appreciates your input. Of course, guys have specific expertise, but we've grown the business together. You know, so it's not like from in my environment, it's not like when I'm talking to a supply chain executive, I'm talking to a supply chain executive because I'm asking him to cut a cost. I'm talking to him about the delivery into stores, and he knows that I know the processes behind and the decisions he's made historically. So for me, I've only created that environment because I've got strong relationships with the people that I work with. It might be different in a more structured organization, and maybe Gideon wants, or the other guys want to answer that question, but for me it really comes down to the relationships I have with those guys.
Gideon?
Relationships are absolutely key, and people need to know you want the same thing, right? That we all want this organization to succeed, and people need to buy, especially bigger organizations, it gets complex, right? You play a very different role than your COO or the head of supply chains. They must know you're not just a gatekeeper, you're a true business partner that wants this organization to succeed. You know you've made it as a CFO if your CEO don't make any decisions without consulting you first. That's the mark of a successful CFO, because you're best positioned to provide strategic input. You also must, for me specifically, where I don't know, I say, I don't know this, you're the expert on this. I can tell you about the financial consequences of this. I can give you better insights into the numbers and how this will pan out in the numbers, but I will not say I'm an expert in supply chain finance or aircraft finance in our world. There's guys that know that better than me. So know where you're strong and know where you're weak. Nakedi?
I think definitely the guys have mentioned relationships are important. So as finance people, it doesn't come naturally to us because most of us are introverted in nature. But you need to build relationships with people from all the different divisions. And once you start building relationships, what that does for you, it breaks the barriers. So it's not as threatening, you know. And for me, what's helped as well is that you must always know why you're doing something, right? So if you're challenging somebody on something, you need to understand why, and you need to explain to them the outcome that you're trying to drive. The minute you don't know the why, then it's very difficult, you know, to convince anyone to do anything, right? So definitely relationships, but really understand why you're doing something and what you're trying to drive, you know, with that. People tend to really accept you from that perspective.
Brilliant. Excellent question, thank you. Who else? Someone else had a hand up. Oh, there we go, thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for the very insightful steps into fast-tracking our finance careers. So you guys touched on the steps that one can take to becoming, you know, a great CEO or CFO rather, and it's things like your, you know, soft skills and your personal skills, studying further and everything. I just wanted to ask if you guys would consider something like overseas exposure as a beneficial aspect to have in a South African context if you are pitching or trying to get to that CFO level. Because I ask this because in the CA space, there's a lot of pressure to, you know, after your articles, go overseas for that jet or that 2-year secondment. And it seems like that's what's more attractive on the CVs these days when you now come back to South Africa and try to sell yourself in corporate spaces. So I'm just asking from that perspective.
You've worked on 4 continents?
So, in my personal opinion, this is a big world. You want to see as much of it as you can, firstly because it's fantastic to see how different people think, how different people live, what's out there. Career-wise, you want to have something on your CV that's different from anyone else, that's got a bit more experience. I worked in the harbor in Valparaiso in Chile. I did documentations, letters of credit. I've given training in Zurich in a computer program, not that I knew anything about it. So in my personal opinion, not just from your CV, but from your life experience, give yourself those opportunities. It might take you 2 years longer then to get to you 2 years older when you sit here. At the same time, you'll be a richer person, a more balanced person, and you'll have a lot of fun along the way. So that's my personal view on that. I'm keen to hear the other guys' view.
You want to have a go?
I think I tend to agree with that. But that being said, if you do not get that exposure, I don't think it's a deal breaker in terms of your career. But I mean, I had the opportunity to work in Houston for 8 months. And for me, it really opened up my perspective because the culture there is different, the way they operate is different. And for me, going there as a young black woman in Texas, how to navigate, the traditional, I never saw another black female in corporate there, it was just old white males. And she's from Africa, So really, it really stretches you. It shifts you out of your comfort zone. But also, like you said, you have a lot of fun. You get to travel. You get to see different things. You get to experience different cultures. So I think it just gives you, you have nothing to lose. That's what I think.
We've kind of run out of time, but I'm going to push for one last question if someone wants just one last one. Is that okay?
My question is not actually technical, it's more personal, right? At a CFO level, is there such a thing as maintaining a work-home balance? Because
No.
I think a lot of people, the perception is that you're constantly working, right? Do you find that you have to sacrifice certain relationships or certain things that you like doing, or if you are able to maintain that balance, how do you do it?
Roy.
No, I mean, it's a very valid question. I think it comes down to what work-life means, right? So over, I suppose, my career, work-life balance was very traditional in how people defined it. So, you had a good work-life balance if you went from work from 8 to 5 and you came home and you spent time with your children. Whether either of those was productive was never included in whether the balance was there, which is crazy. So, I mean, Gideon made the point earlier, like that the hours in the day, I have a little girl, I can't really yet define her to an hour where I can put her to bed because she kind of goes in her own direction. But it's a special time for me and her. If I get that time with her and I have to work 13 hours for the rest of the day, I'm okay with that. That for me is work-life balance. So for me, work-life balance is a prioritization, and it also has to be looked at longer term. So yes, maybe there's some sacrifice in spending a little bit more time at work versus balance, but I'm making it comfortable for her and my extended family. So it's a very, for me, in my own view, it's a very personal definition of what that means. I personally have never had to sacrifice any relationships, so I can't comment on that, but I think it's a very personal definition of work-life balance.
We are out of time. Great questions. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed the session. Please, a huge round of applause. These guys have been amazing.